Welcome back to the Tip of the Ice-Burgh podcast, brought to you as always by InsideThePenguins.com. We're joined by a very special guest here on this Thursday episode as we welcome on Jesse Marshall, Penguins writer for The Athletic. Jesse, how's it going today?
Good. It's always good to be with the Knicks.
We appreciate you coming on and we appreciate and take humbly your time, and we want to just get right into it because the Penguins, there's a lot to talk about. There's a lot going on with this team. As we record this, they're in the midst of a 7-game losing streak, and a large portion of that is because of the bottom six. It is struggled throughout this entire stretch, and it's put a lot more pressure on the top end of the lineup. So what I wanted to ask you, Jesse, is how much will the returns of guys like Jeff Carter and Teddy Blueger be able to help out the bottom half of this lineup?
I don't think a lot, frankly. I don't think Jeff Carter has it. In the time that we've seen him, he's not really been able to carry the play much. Kind of, getting caved in. I think he's been a streaky scorer, which the streakiness has come in handy sometimes, right? Like it's. I think there's been opportune moments for him in his time here where the scoring has coincided with moments where they've needed it. But overall, I just don't think it's enough. And I love what Teddy does. Defensively, I think he's still, I think the magic of Blueger, Aston Reese, and Tanev is certainly no longer around. And his defensive results have taken a step back individually as a result of that environment not being the same. Um, however, again, if you're looking for more offense, Teddy is not going to help you, right? That's really not depth scoring isn't really something that he hangs his hat on. So I don't, are you look at what happened today? Kapanen not in the lineup at all. Um, I question how mm, I'm not intimating anything with this by any stretch of the imagination. Let me be very clear. This is my own question that I'm asking, but like I get, Ron Hextall signs Kapanen, right? He obviously wants him back, but I don't get the impression that Mike Sullivan like super feels the same way. If you follow the ice time trends and the fact that he was basically an extra today or whatever the case may be. Um, I don't know. I just for me, I think that you look at Brock McGinn, you look at Kapanen, you look at Carter. Um, I think Danton Heinen's probably the one guy right now down in that bottom six you look at and you say, okay, like I feel like you can rely on him to give you a couple even strength goals every now and then on a pretty consistent, not a consistent basis, but a semi-consistent basis. I don't see that, really in like a lot of other places within the lineup in that bottom six specifically. So, getting healthy, I think is only important. Um, if it's healthy in impactful areas, right? And unfortunately, just for the Penguins, it just really hasn't been.
Yeah, and one of the other drawbacks for the Penguins so far, obviously the bottom six, but both special teams units has struggled. I mean, with Teddy Blueger coming back, what kind of help does he bring to the penalty kill? But on the flip side, what's been up with this power play? Like, is there any sort of new scheme or concept that could work, or is it just really a matter of shooting the puck more?
Yeah, that's it. I mean, it's so to me, I think that the one commonality you run into with this unit specifically, right, is the structure that they have chosen, right? It lends itself to really aggressive penalty killing units from the opposing team, bullying them to the exterior of the ice, right? Really like low percentage areas. And then the deference starts. Well, I'm not going to do it and you can do it. And then we start playing patty cake on the outside of the ice and everybody's like disharmonious. So I don't know that, I think it's personnel right now more in its system. I would change it. I would go simpler. You're gonna have to just suck it up. And I know you want to have all the horses, up on the top unit and all the big guns in the same spot, but that's just not gonna work right now. Um, I know a lot of people like when sometimes I think people have a tendency to oversimplify when it comes to this stuff, but it really is as easy in this case
Mm-hmm.
as shoot and force the defense to react to you, right? Because when you don't do that, you give them the ability to dictate the pace at which the game's playing. I did like an article a couple weeks ago for McKean's on the Islanders penalty kill and like how supremely aggressive it is and protects these really important areas that other teams want to get to. And the only way to really break that up is to go high low with your movement, get pucks on net and make them scramble, right? Make them react. And the Penguins just don't do that at all. And I think, Blueger really helps the penalty kill from the perspective of his spatial awareness, because there's just so much, I think just defensive zone, just don't even worry about the penalty, whether we're on the penalty kill or not. Like defensive zone period, there's just no spatial awareness. If you take a straight line and divide the defensive zone in half, right, between the circles, right, the system that's basically what it does. It zones the defensive zone out. You call it one of a million names, a strong side overload, is a puck side overload, whatever the hell you want to call it. It's all the same thing, right? It's all describing the same thing. You draw a line down the middle of the ice, and when the Penguins have things sort of like um, located in one side, they're fine. But when it switches and you have to change your overload over, and your players are rotating in transition in the D zone, they have no idea what's going on. And I just think it's like it's not so much of like a lack of direction, because this has been the system since 2015. It's never changed. They've been doing the same thing the whole time. It's just a like lack of awareness, puck watching. Somebody else will get to it. Like going down on one knee and sliding around for 25 feet. Like this is not the stuff you get from like an engaged team. So like I do think Blueger helps you there to answer your question.
Mhm.
It's a modicum, right? It's a moderate amount. Like I think that the defense is really where the disaster's been, and that has got to be the thing that gets figured out here.
Speaking of that defense, I think Brian Dumoulin has received the brunt of this fan base's anger. You had a really good piece on him last week that I read that just kind of describes where he is lacking. And certainly the unfortunate part is he's lacking in areas where he used to excel at. So do you think that those bad habits you see in his game right now are something that he's going to be able to turn around and then elevate his current play to get back to his old standard? Or is this the Brian Dumoulin that we now see is what he's going to be?
This is it. Yeah, I think this is what you get now, and I think that the challenge is for Mike Sullivan has been to bounce. Where does it fit now? Like where do I put him? Where's the best spot for him? Because it's not on the top pairing anymore, I don't think. It doesn't. And if you think about it logistically, guys, does that let Letang be Letang? Not really, right? Like if his goal is to be this like adventurous, offensive oriented defenseman that's almost a fourth forward. Um, I think his perception of how he needs to play changes if he doesn't have the confidence in his partner. Not to say that Letang has been like this unstoppable, world beater. He's got his own flaws that he's got to work out simultaneously. But the traditional dichotomy that we've seen, why that pairing works, is just it seems like it's completely out of funk. And I think with a little less ice time, with a little less burden, with a little less in the way of competition, you can kind of help guide Dumoulin back. Look what it did with POJ. That those lower deployments can be such a confidence booster. Um, you know, it's you're taking the skill based matchmaking out, to use a gaming term, and you're kind of just giving them the easies, right? And I think that's what's needed. I think that's really where right, you get into this like overcomplicating trends thing, where I think over time, you lose your second nature. You start to think about the game too much. You start to over process information. You look at Dumoulin, it's not, I think everybody's thing was, well, he's had these injuries and he's been beat up and his speed isn't the same. And while that's all true, and you can see all that, like a lot of these mistakes aren't specific to that being the problem. Like these are things that are like, again, coverages, like, getting himself out of position. Like these are all like, I don't think they're just tied to speed. So I think that's the change of scenery. I think it's time to try to reimagine things. And, luckily, they have a guy in Marcus Pettersson who's basically doing what Brian Dumoulin used to do 3-4 years ago, and they have the opportunity to give that a try.
Yeah, and that's kind of leading into what I was going to get to is Dumoulin aside, what have you liked or disliked about the rest of this defensive core? Because it's a lot of new guys, and they all seem to be doing something very new to this team.
Yeah, I think POJ seems to be confident. That's good. I think he's deserved the bump in ice time. I think everybody feels that way, frankly. I think where he really struggled last year was in those instances where the game would flip on him and he'd be, in the offensive mindset, and all of a sudden he's got to pivot and go play D. And then the assignments that you have to pick up on the fly and in the breakout, and making sure your spatial awareness is there. I think that's stuff that he's had to grow into. Probably a better performance from him than I expected. I didn't think he'd flounder in that third pairing role by any stretch of the imagination, but I didn't think he'd be that good. So it's a good sign. Jan Ruud is fine. I think he's been fine, right? Like it is what he is. What he is. You know, he's sort of your prototypical unassuming type of defenseman. I think it's fair to call Jeff Petrie a disappointment at this point. Yet it's early. I mean, we can't get carried away here. He's spent way too much time in the penalty box. I mean, really, at the end of the day, like it's hard to evaluate him and put those penalties on the shelf and take them out of the equation. That's the first step, I think, is just get out of the box, stay at 5-on-5, and you know, I do think he's brought a physical element to the net front. I don't think it's translated into the stats much. I don't think we've really seen a net benefit from it. So up and down, like Letang, I don't really think has found his center. I think it's some really, by that I mean like not the position, like personally. I just the first when they went on that run early and they were scoring 6 goals a night, I think that he had some really strong performances in there. But then as time has gone on, as the losing streak is extended, like there's been some nights where he's just been in a funk. So I feel like they have a lot of capable bodies, right? I just don't know that they've got the most harmonious balance for them yet. I don't know they found that the pairings that really work. And it always stinks too when like John Marino is like one of the best, top 5 defensemen in the National Hockey League, which nobody, I think saw coming this year. But again, like this isn't a situation where you need to go out and find people, right? You need to find the right use for the people you have, and I think that's always an easier job than the alternative.
And with that, we're starting to see Mike Sullivan lose his patience with that original deployment the way that he had it for a certain amount of time, which, he gave them about 10, 15% of the season. And when things don't get any better and they continue to stay the way they are, you understand why Sullivan tries a couple different things. I mean, Saturday, he put Pettersson on the line in the first period, or P.O. Joseph on Letang's wing on the first period, Pettersson on the line in the second period, just trying different things to get a spark on the defensive side. And when it comes down to it, if you don't, Tristan Jarry is usually the one that has to face the brunt of the consequences for that. He's taken a lot higher percentage of high danger chances over the last couple of games, and he's really struggled in the third period this season. And as a result, he has an .882 save percentage in the final frame, which is just not enough. It's his worst period statistically so far this season. So how worried are you about his performance, or do you put a lot of that on the defensive performance?
Two separate answers to that question. Second half, no, he's been below the line. That like we have data that separates that out and accounts for environment. So if we look at goals saved above average, for instance, like creates this utopian number that a league average goalie would have allowed or prevented X number of goals over your performance, right? He's below the line. He is. So, and it stinks. It's volatile. It's not a great place to play right now, as far as being a goaltender goes. But like I've said this on Twitter, like I think even before I looked this data up and before I started, because it really wasn't until today that I even started thinking about goaltending statistics, because you need like a certain margin of sample size for me to even consider it as anything other than anecdotal. And I feel like we just kind of put our toe over that threshold. But even before I looked at the numbers, I would have told you I think he needs. It's hard to ask this, right? And it's going to feel selfish, but there are times where you need a save, right? Like you just need one. Circumstances and expected goals be damned. Like you just need it, and then they haven't gotten it in the streak, so stinks. I feel like there were games earlier in the year when they were winning where he was lights out and was one of the best goalies in the league, but times have changed. So I think he's just another one that needs to find his center again, and I think he's better than some of the recent performances he's put out, acknowledging again that the environment's been a little bit volatile, but I think there's a little bit more that I think that they need from him right now, especially that one of the ways you get out of a streak like this is goaltending, right? I mean, that's one of the ways you can get pulled out of it, is a game that the guy stands on his head, gives you 2 points you probably didn't deserve that night, and all of a sudden you come the rink the next day, everybody's got a different attitude. So below the line for me right now.
It hasn't been pretty, but I mean, good or bad overall, like I said, it could be good or bad. What has surprised you the most about this team this year, whether it be a player or how coaching has gone? Just what has been the most shocking part of the season?
Well, shock. Okay, I'm gonna start with a more obvious one then I think, like right out of the gate, and it's just how good that top six has been. I think despite like all the things talked about them needing help and like needing, which is true, they do, right? But it's kind of cool that you could take Rust and Raquel and interchange them, in these positions, and it doesn't really seem to matter all that much. I think Jason Zucker has been really good, so far. Finding scoring areas, seems to have a lot more initiative. More willing to put the puck on the net. That's helped immensely. That I think has been the real strength of everything so far is that you have a really interchangeable top six that you could swap around and mix and match based on what you need that evening. And I think they've looked good. If they can get help and they can keep just their status quo with more help is a great situation for this team. We
Mhm.
just that's the challenge I think for the coaching staff is trying to get them there, right?
The one thing I wanted to finish this off with, Jesse, thank you again for giving us your time this afternoon. We always appreciate you coming on to the show, but
No, and I appreciate, but so that your listeners know too, you gave me a little bit of grace today. I have a toddler, so it's always a little bit difficult sometimes to be on time for things. So I really appreciate that.
Oh, of course. Like we understand that completely. When we were sitting here talking, honestly, we basically had a show before the show, just complaining about the practice from earlier today.
I
But you
got
know
it. Yeah.
what? I'm very happy you wore that hat because I wanted to
Yes.
ask Jesse. The Pittsburgh Monopoly board was unveiled last week.
Oh
The
yeah.
two colleges were Carnegie Mellon and Pitt. Should we join together as voices of Point Park and just make a petition to get the Point Park University on the Monopoly board?
Here's the thing, like I just to me like if you're logistically building the Pittsburgh Monopoly board and Wood Street makes an appearance, you're remiss to not have Point Park. And I don't know if Wood Street shows up. I haven't looked at the board, but if there's a Wood Street on that Monopoly board, or even if it was the Boulevard of the Allies, I'll even give you that. Either one, and you don't have Point Park, that's a huge mistake. It's a huge
I-
mistake. It
I
belongs
f-
there.
Yeah, I forget what exactly is on the board. I didn't think it
No
was that
disrespect
great.
meant to Duquesne. I love my Duquesne friends, but
That's the other thing too. I was gonna say, if anything, Duquesne should get on before Point Park. Just gonna put that one out there. But it wasn't a
But
pretty
nobody
board. I
has our
think
space though, Nick. That's the
you're
thing,
right.
right? Like we dominate that downtown space. Like Oakland's full. It's very busy up there.
Yes,
Pick one of them. They're fine. We're
Duke
like a landmark.
because Duquesne did a good job of sheltering themselves off from the rest of the city
That's right.
with
Yeah.
that hill and those fences,
Yeah.
and then the road.
Yeah. But they have it made as far as going to games is concerned, man. Like you live in Duquesne, and
Yeah.
there's nothing better in the world than being able to walk 2 blocks over to the arena. And they
Yeah,
always had the advantage because back in the day, back when I was a kid, you could go and like go to the student rush line a day early,
yep.
like and get a
Mhm.
ticket. But then like they changed that, and then you had to wait in line. But you always had to fight the Duquesne kids off because
Yeah.
they literally right there had a home field advantage for every student rush game.
Yeah, one of my friends who works with Jen Bolano now, she goes to Duquesne and lives literally directly across the street from the arena. There's
Yeah,
an
so you
apartment
can't
complex
compete
right
with
there.
that.
She's
You
able
got
to
to get a
pop
10
right
or
over.
something if you want to get out there early enough
Yeah.
to get yourself a ticket.
Yeah, I believe also Pepe's and Permanis would like a word with Millie's ice cream for getting on there over those two. So,
How-
the decisions were
Wow.
interesting.
yeah.
No Permanis?
Yeah.
That's crazy to me.
It was a weird
Pepe's
board.
is something that I would be me, I love Pepe's, but that's shocking to hear that there's no Permanis. I've never had Millie's ice cream before.
Neither have I.
Me neither.
Yeah, I don't even yeah.
And the three of us all lived downtown for multiple years.
You ever
Really?
hear
Yeah, no kidding.
Bebes?
Like we were in downtown. There wasn't a lot I didn't experience down there. Does Mandarin Gourmet have a square?
No.
No,
Didn't think
no,
so.
it does not. They just basically wiped off the corner of Real and World in Point Park University and everything surrounding it.
Oh, that's a shame. What was the name? Did you guys ever go? We always do this to get off like a tangent. Did you guys ever go to the buffet that was on this? It's on Wood Street, but on the other end, and it was on the 3rd floor of a building.
No.
I'll send you a link to the place after we're done. I'll DM it to you on Twitter. It's still there. I just was at least recently. It's like 2017, 18. Because I stopped there and got lunch, but I don't even know what it's called. But it's literally like you just walk into this nondescript building, like downtown on Wood Street. You wouldn't like it's just an office, but then like eventually you meander around far enough, take these stairs up, 2 flights, and then there's this whole. It's a buffet with multiple stations and ice cream machine. It's unreal. So I'll send it. If you've never been, let me put you on. Stop on your way up to a game one day. You won't regret it.
That's about to be the
It's
lunch
fun.
spot. Yeah.
Yeah. So
The last thing I want to ask you, Jesse, before we let you go, Evgeny Malkin's 1,000th game is coming up here in a couple weeks. I just want to know, what is your favorite memory of watching Evgeny Malkin with the Pittsburgh Penguins?
full clocked slapper in Philadelphia. Mike Richards, I think, was the one that hit him, right? Yeah.
Buried him in the boards, yeah.
Yeah. And then Joel Beninati accused him of cherry picking. so he gets blown up behind the net, like picks himself up off the ice, like drags himself back through the offensive zone, tags up, and then as he tags up, I think it was Sergei Gonchar, right?
I believe so, yeah.
Saw him coming back and like made this stupid pass. And then he caught it, and he had all day. He was one of those ones where he could have gone to goal back and then back again, like and gone, you know what I mean? Like he had that much time, but he just wound up on Marty Biron and let one rip from point blank range at about 150 miles an hour. And it was just one of those ones. It was like he was so mad from having gotten blown up like that, that he was just gonna let her rip. But that's one of my favorites. And then I think just the random games against Winnipeg that he got in fights.
Oh my God,
what is
yeah.
that? I don't understand. Like, there are just certain teams, like Tampa was one early on, in the 011, like 2011 to 011, 12-ish area. He would go off against them, have like these 6-point nights, fisticuffs flying around. And you never understood, like, what is it that went on down there that night that like caused all that to happen. But that's probably the two that just stand out to me the most. They're really trademark signature, like umphy moments, it's so funny because like with the benefit of like hindsight, we always expected like Crosby to be the more Lemieux like player, but I don't ever think that was really the case. Like cerebrally, sure, yes, but from a physical prowess perspective, like 71 and 66 were always way more in line because they had that like I'll bully you over mentality when they had the puck on their stick. So I don't know. There's just a couple ones for me that I always think about as being just fun times.
Well, Jesse, thank you so much for giving us your time and joining us here on the show. We'll have to have you back sometime a little bit later in the season, but let our listeners know where they can find you on social media and anything coming up for you on any of the publications that you post for now that you're on multiple.
Yeah, so at JMarshFOF on the Twitter machine. I'm still doing the Penguins for the Athletic. That's not changed. I mentioned we did the Dumoulin piece last week, but I'm also doing non-Penguins work at McKean's, which is my first time writing about anything outside the National Hockey League. So we covered the Islanders in their power play last week, and we're going to look at the Avalanche the penalty kill. Excuse me. We're going to look at the Avalanche power play and how they managed to score a goal basically every time they get one. This week, and the answer is they're all really good players, but that's just not the only thing. You have to be able to do the right things when you have really good players, and their strategy is pretty on point as well. So,
well, thank you so much for joining us. We will be back on this episode to close things out by giving a quick preview of this weekend's matchups.